install it all you want. Pretty cool.
Don't need the black box, huh?
I'm hoping not. Well, you know, there's always what we call stupid pilot tricks. And somebody's got to figure out something stupid to do, you know. They always do. But, oh, well. You can't.
It's better than the competition, right?
Well, yeah. Well, our competition says that it's an emergency procedure when you fly their airplane asymmetric soars. Isn't that funny? Oh, let's see. I didn't put the word for the day up. We've got extra vowel in there someplace.
What's a vowel among friends?
Well, what's in vowel among friends? That's right.
Can I buy a vowel?
Buy a vowel. Buy a Greek vowel. P-N-E-U-M-A-T-O-S. Pneumatos. Pinematos. Pinematos. The Greeks pronounce the P, which we don't, right? We drop consonants where we want, right? Pinatos. But this is pneuma. Pneuma. And, you know, I thought about this. We need to yak a little bit about something that every kid in Greece knew and every Roman kid knew, but nobody knows nowadays. And this is kind of the basis for a lot of stuff going on in here. Remember the parts of the human, according to the Greeks? We got sarx, suke, suke, and pneuma. Now here's an interesting question. All right, and the Greeks have asked this question forever and ever. This is a very important question. It is probably the most important philosophical question that you can ask, especially in relation to God. But nobody seems to ask it or want to talk about it. There's only a few people that talk about this question. And the question is, what about free will? This is a question that bothered the Greeks a lot. Why do you think it bothered the Greeks? What's that? Say again?
They believed in fate.
They believed in fate. Remember, they believed in pathos. The pathos is the thing, right? And so pathos means you're fated. Fated. Okay, riddle me this, Batman. If you're fated, do you have any free will? No, you can't have free will. It's impossible. So remember, this is why this is so important to remember. That remember, we start with animism, and we go to pantheonic paganism, and pagan, basically pagan. And then we go to, remember what the third religious, Mysterion. And then we go to Gnosticism. And the world is today what? Gnostic. The world is Gnostic today because they're stupid. They don't ask the question. You got to look. If you can't answer the basic philosophical, okay. What rules the world today? What philosophical idea rules the world today? A single one.
Humanism.
Humanism, which is basic. What do we call that in science? We have a name for that. Humanism. We call it humanism. That's a term it's kind of pejorative, but it's been thrown in there. It is a true thing. Scientism is good. But we call this, there are two sides of the scientific question in the age of reason. When you guys say the age of reason in 6th grade, right? In the age of enlightenment? Secularism is another word for it, but it comes from this. The very important thing, okay, look guys, you know, I wish they taught, you know, they should take my curriculum and teach kids because these kids aren't learning anything. People just don't learn the most basic important things. What was the age of reason about? What was the fight? There was only one reason for the age of reason. What was the fight in the age of reason? This is like in my opinion, this is like one of the most important things to know about the world. It is why the world is today. The age of reason was a fight between logic and empiricism. In logic, the logisticians in the age of reason said what? I can know the world through
Empirical data.
logic alone. I don't need empirical data to prove the world. I can use philosophy, basically logic, to prove the world. But the empiricists said what?
Gotta have evidence.
I gotta have proof. I gotta have data. Right? And this was a huge fight. Because if I go this way, what do I use to prove the world?
Arguments.
Mathematics. Logos to telos. Yes, but I use mathematics. And if I go this way, what do I use to prove the world? Science and scientific method. Scientific method. If I use this method, I use logic. And I use this method, I use scientific method. Which led us to the Age of Enlightenment. And what was the Age of Enlightenment all about?
Blending them together.
Huh?
Blending them together.
No, the opposite. The Age of Enlightenment was about taking empiricism. See, the empiricists won. In the age of reason, the logisticians lost, the empiricists won. And so as we go into the Age of Enlightenment, the whole thing of the world was to take empiricism and apply it to everything. So what was the first thing they applied empiricism to?
God.
To God in what? God in the documents, the Old Testament, New Testament. This is where the Tübingen school. This stuff is really, this is like the world. This is why the world is the way it is. The Tübingen school is a German Lutheran school of philosophy, which is the modern view. This is the modern theology today, is Tübingen school. In Tübingen school, they began to apply empiricism to the Old Testament, New Testament. And what could they not find?
Enough repeatable events.
Well, this was the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment, was the beginning of the age of archaeology. And in archaeology, they started looking for
The evidence.
the evidence. And what was the evidence they were looking for, first of all?
Jesus' tomb, the ark.
Jesus' tomb, the Ark of the Covenant, the Babylon. They looked for Troy, right? They were looking for everything that they could find in literature because they wanted to see if what? The empirical records matched the data they had from antiquity. And so the Tübingen school's conclusion was what?
It's not real.
It's not real because they couldn't find Babylon, they couldn't find Troy, they couldn't find any evidence of Pilate, they couldn't find any evidence of a lot of stuff in the ancient world for a long time. And then what did they start finding?
The evidence.
They started finding evidence like crazy. They found inscriptions about Pilate, they found Babylon, they found Troy, they found every place mentioned in the Old Testament documents has been found. So Tübingen school was alive and well for about 100 years, from the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment until it's still alive. The only problem is
It's debunked.
it has been debunked. It's kind of like Keynesian philosophy, Keynesian economics. Almost everything in Keynes has been debunked,
Except they still go by it.
but they still go by it. See, everything in Tübingen school has been debunked. Tübingen school is very important because in Tübingen school philosophy, theology, it doesn't matter if there's a historical record or not. All that matters is, you know what all that matters is?
Hard evidence.
That belief.
Belief, yes. Belief is all that matters in Tübingen school philosophy. And guess what came directly out of Tübingen school theology? Anybody heard a guy called Karl Barth? Karl Barth is the father of evangelical theology. Karl Barth and who's the other guy? Karl and his buddy. Karl and his buddy. And their whole belief, their whole construction of what's called evangelical theology was supposed to debunk Tübingen school. The only problem is, what did they do that was wrong? Anybody know what Karl Barth did that was wrong? Karl Barth assumed, quite incorrectly, that Tübingen school was right, that empiricism can't prove New Testament, Old Testament. And that's what we call, that's really, there's a thing called the evangelical heresy. What is evangelical heresy? Well, the New Testament, what does the New Testament mean? Well, it doesn't matter what it means. It is what it means to me, right? Talk about irrational. So all the thousands of years of people studying the New Testament documents in Greek, it doesn't matter what it means or what it says. All it matters is what it says to me. That's called the evangelical heresy. And that's where it came from Tertullian school. The modern era, what must I have to be proved? Empiricism, right? But remember, what are the tools that we have to prove truth? Guys, remember the tools? I teach them every class.
Legal historical.
What's that?
Legal historical.
The legal historical, the scientific method, and 3, logic. These are the 3 tools to know truth. In the modern era, where's the world gone to? Scientific method. But the scientific method can be only used to prove what? Repeatable events. Yeah, and these are legal historical events repeatable? Nope. Logic is not repeatable either. It's not within the context of, it's not repeatable in the context of the scientific method. We have to get into detail to see that. But in any case, the point that I'm trying to make is this. In the ancient world, the most important question in the ancient world were questions of logic and philosophy. And the most important question was free will. So let's go back to this. In the modern era, we think empiricism is it. And this is why we don't teach kids what anymore? Logic or the legal historical method. So we teach it to kids. These are the most, you know, they take 2 of the methods to know truth and throw it in the garbage. And this drives me crazy. So let's talk a second about
They
what...
don't want people to know the truth, though, because when people are dumb, you can control them better.
That is exactly what Dewey said. Dewey said that, and so did, what's his name? The Go West young man said that. There's all the great founders of the U.S. education system.
I mean,
Horace
is it really
Greeley
that
said.
sinister, or is it just, through this Turbidian philosophy, we lost any respect for the truth that comes out of legal and logic?
No, there were progressives. And progressives believed and wrote quite succinctly that they believed that the best way to control the people was to control education. That's why one of the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto is state-controlled education. Which, by the way, the Nazis had, the Italians had, you know, every great dictatorship had state-controlled education because it allows you to control what goes in the minds of kids with young mush. You know, that's what you do. The Soviet Union did it too. So, you know, this is a great method, is state-controlled education. Until we start teaching people.
It's also the biblical.
What's that?
To control the education of your children, teach them the conscripts of God, write up them on your heart, etc., etc. That was the basis of education at that time.
But who did it?
The
The
Israelis.
parents.
The parents! See, you're wrong. It's not, it doesn't take a village unless you're progressive.
I didn't say
It
it,
takes
was the
parents.
parents otherwise. I
See?
said it was education.
The problem is, if you give the hands to the government, then you're going to get what we got today, which is uneducated children who can't read and write, who don't know logic, and basically we don't even teach the stuff in the universities that's the most basic stuff, and I think, of human society and knowledge. So anyway, let's go back to what they knew that we don't know. And the most important thing that we don't know is about free will. Let's talk about God and free will. Can God affect Suke?
The unconscious.
I tell you what, let's put it this way. We use the words can and will. Can God do anything he wants? Yes. Will God affect Suke? Will God affect Suke?
We don't think so.
He does sometimes.
The free will
In the
concept.
Bible, it says some places where God hardened people's hearts.
Only in English. Please no English.
King
Only
Saul.
Greek and only Greek is allowed and only Hebrew is allowed. And there is no place where it says that God controls human thinking. Because to do so, you have a serious problem. What's the problem you have?
No free will.
You don't have free will. If at any point in time,
But he's a master teacher.
if at any point in time, okay, can there be free will if at any point in time God controls any man's thoughts? No, you can't have it. The Greeks knew this, the Romans knew this, this is something that's absolute. God cannot affect Suke. Guess what most of the talking and teaching is about in the
Wait a minute, you took. the
God
different-
will not affect
Okay.
Sukkot.
Okay.
God can do anything he wants. That is a definition of God and an assumption of God. Yeah.
We're talking free
What
will
about in
concept
Job,
here.
where it seemed like God was playing
Well, just-
games
We're
with
simply
Job
discussing it presently.
Okay.
and the people around him? What, it almost seemed like controlling people around Job to make things happen, to test him.
I would disagree that he's controlling. And that's where we have to be cautious, because when we read a translation, in whatever language we read it in, we've got to go back to the original sense and the original words. If you make that conclusion, then you have a serious issue. Right?
So what does it say in Hebrew rather than God hardened Pharaoh's heart or whatever?
I have to go back and look to see specific, because I have taught that class before to see exactly what it is. But you can't, it's very difficult for us to, for example, the words God hardened Pharaoh's heart comes from cardia poreum, pora whatever, which means that he made his heart hard, okay? But in Greek, what is a heart? What is a heart? Emotions, it's emotions. And Greeks would say, are emotions part of Suke? No. In Greek thought, emotions are not part of Suke. They're part of Sarx. Yes, ma'am.
This morning on Wikinar, I think I heard something that really endorses that free will thought. It said, the speaker said, God's will to send people to hell who have rejected him is his act of supreme love, because they wouldn't want to be with him in earth right after earth. And so sending them to hell was an act of supreme love.
That's okay.
It's like that was their free will to choose that.
Right, it is their free will. And I'm not disagreeing. I'm just telling you that if you make a conclusion that God will affect your Suke, then what you do not have is, you don't have free will anymore.
But
See?
He can do that.
And if that's true, what's that?
He can do that.
He could do that, but he will not do that. If he did that, it would be the end of God.
Go back to the.
This is like one of those things where the rabbis said that if God changed the law, it'd be the end of God. I disagree with the rabbis. I don't think the rabbis are right on with that, but that's okay. This is a truth. This is an irrefutable truth. You can have it, you can't have it both ways. Because if God can affect Suke, what can he do to every human being?
Well, you can.
He can make you believe. That's right. And if he can make you believe, you just solve the problem of sin. You just solve the problem of death. You just solve the problem of human. The problem is that God doesn't want robots. You know, that's the deal. He wants Suke that's free. All right. Then the next question is obvious. Can God affect Sarx? Yes, he can. Will he affect Sarx?
He did with,
And Job, he does.
yeah, he healed all these people. That's affecting Sarks.
God, and you know, that's the point. God will and has in the past affected the real world. So when you say, if we can define emotions as part of Sarx, then maybe we can, you know, and like I said, I didn't get into the huge depth of looking into the Hebrews for some of the specifics on that. But I've taught this class before, taught that before. I'm just saying that, you know, yes, we can, but we also see that he does it in limited amounts, right? Intentional limited amounts, because we call those miracles. See? Now, the big question is, can he affect pneuma? And as we get there, that's the point of the lead-in. Because the word of the day is pneuma, and pneuma is, we translate it to be spirit. It is the conscious breath. It is the conscious breath. In Greek thought, suke is thought. It is the unconscious breath. It is logic. It is reasoning. Pneuma is the conscious breath. It is that thing that animates the human soul. It is that part that is the human soul, which, by the way, is part of the spiritual world. And here's a huge fight. Now, you don't have to, well, I'll make a real quick comment on this. What is real and what is not real? What is real and what is not real? I can take the whole of the universe. If I take all of the molecules in the universe and take all the space out of it, you know that if I have a golf ball sized proton, how big is the electron and where is it on average? Because it's infinitely wherever it wants to be in the universe, but on average it is, if my proton is the size of a golf ball,
It's like 5 or 10 miles.
Solar system.
it's 5 miles away and it's the size of the head of a pin, the electron. If I take all the space in the universe and I collapse it in on itself, what can I put it in? And I'm talking about the solar system, our solar system.
A house?
A number 5 bucket, but a house is good. A number 5 bucket about this big, that's kind of used for milking. I can put a whole universe in a number 5 bucket. Now,
That quartz.
all those particles can be made into equals mc squared.
Energy.
MC squared. I can make it into energy. So guess what? All those particles are energy. So is the real world, what is most of the real world?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Space and nothingness. It's just energy. Okay. That's the real world. But what is the spirit? Okay. When you're dead, are your molecules, what happened to your molecules?
Still there in the ground. They go back to the universe.
They're gone, right? What happens when the universe ends? What will remain?
Space.
It's the energy.
What will remain? No, not the energy.
Your pneuma.
Pneuma, the spirit. So what's real? The Greeks knew this. The Greeks knew this. The Greeks reasoned this out. Because even though the Greeks did not know, modern philosophy and atomic theory and other stuff, their reasoning was quite well founded because they said, look, nothing lasts forever. The universe has a beginning, the universe has an end. Human beings have a beginning, have an end. So what exists beyond time? The spirit, the spiritual world. And this is why in their universe worldview, which I really like the universe worldview, you have the what's it? The plenum. The plenum of you have the plenum of everything, and within the plenum of everything, you have the cosmos, which is the created universe, and then you have philosophia, and then you have empirical, the empirical world, that which you can prove or you can prove empirically. And God is within that plenum. God is everything, including the plenum of the earth. So, the big deal here is what exists when everything's gone. The spirit. And the fact that God created what? Spirits, which are us, right? And we are the spirit. So this is a Greek worldview. This is why the Greek worldview appealed to the Hebrews, appealed to everybody. And the Greeks knew this. You see? This is the underlying philosophy that undergirds all of Romans. The things we don't know. The things that the Greeks taught their children. What do you think the Greeks first taught their children? Do you think they taught them to read? Do you think they first taught them to do mathematics? They didn't have mathematics. They did read, but they didn't teach them to read first. What did you teach people first? If you want to go to the very basics, we were talking about this before class started. What is the best thing to teach people? Memorization. So what are the kids going to do? The books are mnemonics. So the first thing you teach them is what? To memorize. And what do you teach within a foundation of memorization? You teach them the logos to telos, that is the basis in the Greek culture of all their writing and all their reading and all their memorization. So the Greek kids learned, the first thing they learned was logic. They learned memorization and logic. And that's why they knew this. This is like, in a Greek setting, the kids sitting around a lyceum or sitting around with a slave that was their teacher. They were being taught these fundamental things about the universe. And we, in the modern world, what do? Well, we shrug off the Greek ideas. We shrug it off because we think Well, what is Greek philosophy to us today?
Mythology.
It's old in mythology. Yeah, it's not really, but you know, to us it's old. It's just something that they learned, right? You don't find anybody who's conversant in the modern era on Greek philosophy. Well, why would you learn it? You know, you don't have any need for that, right? How come people don't study Christian philosophy? Do you realize that Christian philosophy and theology was the main teaching and learning for the universities for 2,000 years? Why don't we teach it? Why don't we study it?
Because they don't want people to know the truth, because the number of people are easier it is to control them.
I would say so too. You notice that all the universities started as universities, godly type universities, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, you know. What have they become? We call them secular, they're empirical universities. They don't care about, you know, does God matter to them? Of course God doesn't matter. God doesn't exist. What's left after Harvard's gone? See? An atheistic worldview, what we call secularism, humanism, you know, there's nothing left. It's all gone. Does that make sense? Does anybody, okay, look, does it make sense that a universe that was created, what, out of nothing, and then goes back to nothing? There has to be a telect cause, right? For both the beginning and end. So only someone who's irrational would say, well, there can't be anything else. That's like nuts. That's like nutso, right? At least you can be honest and say, maybe there's an ancient civilization that's controlling the universe. Oh, that could be like God, right? Oh, sorry. You know, I mean, like, right? You start asking too many questions, and what happens? You start touching the truth. And people can't stand that, because if you start touching the truth, you got a problem. Let's look at Romans, though. Within the context, because we are just about to hit the most important part, in my opinion, of Romans. We're just finishing up in chapter 7. I want to finish this up quickly and get into the most important part here. In chapter 7:25, Charis be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then I myself in my mind, you notice he used the word nous, in my mind, which is intellect. In my intellect, am a slave to God's law, but to the sinful nature, a slave to the law of sin, to miss the mark. What did he just tell you? He has free will in what way?
To submit.
He has free will to submit to God, but he doesn't have the ability to control it. See?
He's saying he didn't have the ability to control God or himself.
Well, he can't control himself. That's the point. You have the sarx, you have the suke. In the suke, he wants to do what? And this is why he didn't use the word suke. He used the word specifically to be nous. Nous means intellect, and also, we translate it mind, but it basically means in his thinking, not in his suke, which includes a lot more than that, but specifically in his thinking, because he is telling you something that's very, very important here. Because we recognize that in free will, we have the choice. Matter of fact, I'll go even further. What did Martin Luther say about free will? Human beings have free will in what? In all matters except one. According to Martin Luther. In all matters except the Spirit. He said this very specifically, because I think Martin Luther understood. The choice of Christ is an intellectual choice. Right? But the Spirit is the thing that allows you to have a degree of power within the sarx and the suke. Remember, well, let's see what he says. Let's see, because this is really interesting. That's the end of 7, and we moved into 18. So this is what he's going to say in 1. Therefore, delta, estu, therefore, no katakrima, no adverse sentence for those in Jesus Christ. And let's use the King James because it's a little better. There is therefore now no condemnation, no katakrima, no adverse sentence to them which are in Jesus Christ. Literally, this says in the Greek, who walk around, who peripato, who walk around not after sarx, but after the Spirit. Now, what's really interesting to me is how the NIV has totally perverted this verse, because it left out the most important part of this verse. Paul's whole talking, the whole point he was making before was about 2 points. What were the 2 points? Sarx and suke. And we know that God will not affect the suke, right? God can affect the sarx. But the whole point that Paul was making before was about sarx and suke. And now he says, there is therefore now no condemnation. Literally in the Greek, the delta, this is the therefore within the logos to telos. Because remember, he's writing to Romans, so he's going to tell them the telos. And this is what he says. No katakrima, no adverse sentence to them which are in Jesus Christ, who peripato, who walk around not after the sarx, but after the pneuma. He already solved the question of suke, right? God can't change your suke, or will not change your suke. Who changes the suke? You do. But we know God can work through the sarx and through the pneuma. So he's saying you walk around in the sarx, peripato. So let's see what he's going to say about pneuma. Because the answer to the problem. What is the problem that he's answering right now? Remember, the overall problem to the Romans is, does this Jesus Christ guy apply? But the end point we've come down to is, what is the question the Romans are now asking him?
How to be saved.
Not how to be saved.
We sin, and so what's the impact?
Yeah, how do we get rid of this sin thing? Because, you know, we're saved, we have diakosune because of Christ, right? Because you don't believe that Christ was resurrected. What do you believe? You believe in the one who resurrected him, right? That's where and I don't like the word belief. Let's get rid of the word belief. That's Turbidian school thought. Instead, we use the word persuaded. I am persuaded that God rose Christ. And that is the answer to diakosune. That's how you are, quote, saved. But the answer was beyond that. Because we know that after you're saved, you still sin. You miss the mark. So he's answering this question. How can I be, not diakosune, but agathos? Remember agathos? Agathos. How can I be good? Good. In the Greek thought, they want to be diakosune. In the Roman thought, they want to be good. They want to do what is worthwhile and right within the context of the universe. And so he's answering this question for them. And by the way, we have the same question, right? We have the exact same question Romans do. This is not a Greek question, it's a Roman question. So, let's look at 2. Because through Jesus Christ, the law, the nomos of the pneuma of Zeo set me free. Literally, el etherio, unrestrained, not a slave, from the nomos of harmantia, miss the mark, and death. This is mirroring, or put it the other way. Martin Luther is mirroring Paul in his thought. Because in the thinking of Paul, using your suke, your logos to tell us you are convinced of the whole point of God, raising Jesus Christ. God is the power of the universe, basically. But then that allows you to now have what kind of subscription? It allows you to take hold of the Spirit. And that's his point here. Let me show that again. 2 is very important. Because through Jesus Christ, the nomos of the Spirit, of life, of Zoe, of set me ethereal, unrestrained, not a slave, maybe not a slave, from the nomos of sin, of harmantia, miss the mark, and thantos. What is the nomos of harmantia and thantos? The law, the Torah law. as well as whatever other subscriptions within law you have. What is the law of the Spirit? He's going to tell us. He's going to tell us what the law of the Spirit is. The law of the Spirit is the thing that allows you to be agathos. And not only that, you notice that he slips in there. Zoe. What's important about Zoe in Greek thought? It means life. And so it directly applies to, specifically to sarx. Right? Indirectly to suke. But is Zoe something to do with pneuma? Kind of not. I mean, this is really interesting stuff, because in Greek worldview, you know, what all the saving that Paul writes about, the saving that Jesus talks about, the saving that we see in the New Testament, the word Zoe is used all the time. That basically we are being saved from life. And this comes back to the question I had at the very beginning. What is real? What is real? If the Spirit is the reality in the world, then what is Zoe? It's life. Yeah, Zoe is Spirit. If the Spirit is real, Zoe is Spirit. Right? It's only that we see sarx. We see sarx. I see your flesh, right? We see the world. Our suke is what? We think suke. But the reality is pneuma. So pneuma has to be the basis of all reality. So, you know, in the Hebrew worldview, people didn't have pneuma. They didn't have the Spirit of God. In the Greek worldview, people have pneuma. And in the New Testament era, what happened to the pneuma of human beings? What did God do on Pentecost?
Gave him the Holy Spirit.
He put his pneuma in humans.
So there's two pneumas.
The Greek worldview would say, yes. The Hebrew worldview would say, I don't know. The Romans are happy with the Greek worldview. This is a great question. Did pneuma exist in human beings prior to God placing it in them? I can't answer that question theologically nor philosophically. But that's another one of those great questions. That's a question in theology, you know, that is worthy of looking at. But not necessarily in this class. So anyway, let's I don't mean that meanly. I'm just saying, you know, these are really important questions, right? And it appears to us that in a Greek worldview there is two different spirits. There's the spirit of the human, you know, that was created with the human being, right? And then there is the Spirit of God that enacts with him. And I think that Paul is going to tell us, yeah, there is that Spirit of God. Well, but he mixes them together too. Let's see what he says. Because this, by the way, verse 2 is a telos. Verse 2 is a telos. Let's go on, verse 3. For what the nomos, what the law was powerless, literally aduntos, not powerful to do, in that it was weakened, literally not strong, by the sarx. You have said, for the law, the nomos, was powerless because of the sarx. Because of the sarx. God did by sending, pimpo, dispatch, he dispatched. I love this word, because we say he sent. But he dispatched. Do you see what dispatched is like? Okay, so God's Son, Jesus, was waiting all the time, you know, kind of like on the starting blocks, right? And the minute that it was time, God said, bang, go, right? He dispatched him. It wasn't just sitting around eating grapes and kind of like, oh, my time will come, right? No, he was ready to go, and he dispatched him. I love that in the Greek. He dispatched his own huios, his own offspring, in the likeness, in the homion, the likeness of sinful, of harmantia, not man, of sarx. He sent him in the likeness of sarx and the sin offering part is added. And so he katakrino, he judged against sin, against hamantia, in sarx. In sarx. Now remember what I told you. Will God affect suke? No. Will he affect sarx? He just did. He just said he did. Because that's what Jesus Christ came to do. It said, he condemned, he judged sarx. Period. 4. In order that the diakosune, the diakoma, the right equitable deeds of nomos might be fully met, literally plera, filled up, who do not live according to, literally, those who do not walk around in the sarx, but according to the pneuma. He's going back. The second time he said this, so it must be important. He said, so the whole point is not to walk around in sarx, because that allows you to now access pneuma. It's not as simple as that, and he's not going to make it as simple as that, because he's going to give us more. In 5, those who live according to the sarx have their, literally, their phonero, their exercise of the mind, their suke. Notice he doesn't say suke, because suke is a thing, is a noun. He says the exercise of their minds. So those people that are walking around peripato and sarx are doing what? They are thinking continually. Their suke is involved continually in those thoughts. Those who live according to the sarx have their panero, their exercise of their mind set on the nature, on the sarx. You know, we've taken this and messed up the translation because I guess we didn't want to use the same word over and over again. But it literally does not say what nature desires. It says sarx. Those who live according to the sarx have their exercise of their mind set on the sarx. But those who live in accordance with the pneuma have their mind set on the pneuma. Now here comes that dichotomy. What is the pneuma? Say, is the pneuma something that man has to begin with, or is the pneuma something that God gives? Paul doesn't exactly answer a question, right? Because he's also writing to Hebrews. And what do the Hebrews believe? Where did they get the pneuma?
From God.
From God. And this pneuma is what allows you to have what? Life eternal. You don't have life eternal without pneuma. Right? Yes, ma'am.
Is this getting into the theological if I asked what about at the very beginning where God breathed his life into the first man?
Well, remember, God nefeshed into the first man. He did not give pneuma to the first man.
But pneuma is a Greek word.
He gave, what's the word in Hebrew? Ruach. He did not give ruach to man. Later on it says that the ruach of God came upon Saul. That's the first time we hear about that. We know it happened before, but it's the first time it says it in the Bible, that the ruach of God came upon a man. And then the ruach of God came upon who else? David. And the ruach of God came upon the prophets, right? And then it was taken away. And finally we see the ruach of God in the pneuma being given at Pentecost to man. The Hebraic view is man was not created with pneuma at all. He was created with nefesh, tzuke, the conscious breath, the unconscious breath. This is why it's very important. In the Old Testament, it does not say that God put his spirit in man. We translate it that way, but that's not what it says. It says literally he put his nefesh in man, which, by the way, he also put his nefesh in animals. In animals. And the word nefesh is used constantly. Remember we did the Psalms? Which word was used? Ruach or nefesh? Almost exclusively it was nefesh. Very rarely did you ever find ruach in the Psalms. The Hebrew worldview is that man does not have pneuma until what happens? God puts the pneuma in man. The Greek worldview is man has a what already? a pneuma. And Paul is writing to Romans and Greeks, and so what happens in that pneuma when you accept Christ?
It dies to yourself and it rises to Christ.
It's being interacted with God, right? It's being used by God, because God can affect what? Sarx and pneuma, but not suki. Anyway, let's see what else goes. 6, love this. The mind, literally mental, the mental thoughts of sarx is thantos, death. But the mind control, literally the mental, by the pneuma is zoe and arena. Do you see this? Okay, to the Greeks and to the Romans, they want what? Zoe. What are the Hebrews looking for? Peace, arena. It's so beautiful because he's writing this, and it's like he wants to constantly remind the people that he's writing this to. I'm including you too. Because this idea of Zoe, what would the Hebrews do with this idea of Zoe? Zoe, what's with that, right? They wanted arena, because even the whole concept, in a Hebrew worldview, when you die, you're what? You're dead. Are you at peace? Well, I guess so. You're at peace as much as an atheist is. You're kind of at peace. Well, then the later Hebraic worldview is, where did you go?
Abraham's bosom.
Sheol. Man, this doesn't sound like a good place to me. Place of darkness and death, where Jesus Christ went, right? To hell, to Sheol, and called Gehenna. Gehenna, like the valley of Gehenna, where the garbage was thrown, right? So you were garbage, right? But now, what can you have? Arena, shalom. Shalom is a living concept, not a dying concept. And so Paul just, he's bringing them back in. At 7 he says, the sarx mind. And look at what we did. We've translated sarx as sinful. We've translated sarx as nature desires. We've translated sarx as sinful nature. We've translated sarx in everything except what it is. It's like the flesh. It just blows me away. In like how many verses? Like 5 verses, we've seen sarx translated 10 different ways almost. Cracks me up. The sarx, mind, pheroma, mental thoughts, is hostile, literally ekthrasia, hostility toward God. It does not submit, hupitasso. And hupitasso, this word is really interesting. I don't think I'll take time to talk about it much, but hupitasso, it does not hupitasso to God's nomos, nor can it do so. I guess I will mention hupitasso. Hupitasso is a really important word, because hupitasso is a word that's described when it says, wives, submit to your husbands. It's also the word that says that when God said he hupitassoed the universe to Jesus Christ, right? So the subordination they're talking about here is not exactly the type of subordination that we think of. It does not hupitasso to God's law. And we would think of that in the terms of putting itself under it, right? Which is an appropriate way of looking at it. So just as Christ was subordinate or hupitasso to God, right? Paul said that women should be hupitasso to their husbands. And yet we know that what did God give Christ in being hupitasso to him in the universe? Control. Control. So in a universe, in a world where what did Greek women have control over? Nothing. And Paul tells them to do what? Well, give them not just some control. How much control did God give Jesus?
Equal to himself.
No, all of it. It wasn't equal. It was all of it. Right? I think this is really interesting because, the word hupitasso in the Greek is very specific in what it means. It doesn't mean to subordinate yourself in the sense of being, it doesn't say doulos, it doesn't say slave, right? It's subordinate in the sense of power. In power.
But to Daniel's point, if he gave it all to him, then God would be subordinate to Christ. So equal to me sounds like a better terminology.
We love that in English sense, but it's not. Because in the ancient world, what does it mean? Okay, let's say that I'm the emperor, and I give authority to you as Pilate to be the praetoria, or what do they call him? He wasn't, what's that? The procurator. I give the procuratorship to Pilate, which means what? What does he have power over?
That area.
Everything.
In that area.
Life and death and everything. And what does it mean if the emperor says, Pilate, I'm going to overrule you?
You no longer have that authority.
Not only you no longer have that authority, it means you go home and you die. You get killed. That's the point of imperial. In the ancient world, when I gave you authority over something, what did you have?
All or nothing.
All the authority. You see, in our worldview, what do we have? Oh, we have 3 equal branches of the government and they all share, right? And how's that working out? No, really, that's the way it's supposed to work, right? But the thing is, in the ancient world, they knew it didn't work that way. In dictatorships, it doesn't work that way. In dictatorship, if you're going to get power, you get absolute power. And that's the way the ancient world worked. And so, I think it's very important. We want to think it's equal power. But literally, it isn't. And by the way, who is in charge of the cosmos? Or actually, who is in charge of this part of the cosmos?
Devil.
The devil.
But Lionel,
Christ did.
okay, he had total power over his area. He did not have total power over Rome. So what I'm saying is when you're Pilate had total over Rome?
No.
He could tell the emperor to go take a hike?
No, he had power over the places, the authority he was given.
Okay,
So
so
that means he does not have equal authority.
No, I never said equal authority. Yeah, I said Pilate has absolute authority over the things that he was given authority over. And that means this guy gave up his authority. This is something that we seem to miss. When you give authority to someone else, it means you give up the authority that you had. It means you trust them. If I, for example,
But if he violates the trust, what happens to him? We already said. Well, then how did he give him? That makes no sense. That's because I'm an English thinker.
That's the way you take it away. You kill him. Yes, ma'am.
That's why Pilate couldn't let Jesus go, because if he did, and the Jews reported him and said he wasn't a friend of Caesar, then, I mean, it was really his life on the line.
I agree. That is absolutely correct. I tried to portray that in my book. That Pilate did everything he could to try to get this Jesus guy out because he was in a problem. He had this Jesus guy that he was trying to get off the hook because he knew it was going to cause insurrection and problems for him. And at the same time, he wanted to do what he had to do to keep the peace. And so
His point is that because the emperor could overrule Pilate, therefore the emperor has more power than Pilate. So therefore, God would have more power than Jesus.
I don't disagree with that idea.
Isn't that
What I want
kind
you to
of
see.
what you're saying, Steve? I think that's
I know
in
he's
our
saying.
minds. That's what we're processing.
And I don't want you to process it that way.
I
I
know.
want you to process it
That's
in the
what
ancient
we're-
worldview. I want you to not process it in our modern mindset where we think that equal powers means equal powers. Look, I want you to see this how the ancient world saw this. When Paul said that men should hupatasso to their wives, he meant they should give them absolute power over these things. When it says that Christ was hupatasso to God, it means that Christ had power over all of these things on his own. Yeah.
I think we're all thinking of the Athanasian Creed, where it talks about the Trinity and equal all the way through.
Unity and Trinity, but you know what? I don't think it says equal. I have to go back and look. Because I don't think it ever says that God, Christ, and the Holy Spirit are equal.
It says co-equal and co-eternal.
Co-equal, co-eternal. But
Is
then,
that the same thing?
well, for example, begotten and not made.
Right.
Begotten,
Can I
not
make
made.
another comment?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it important?
It is important for us to see the power, because, for example, in our worldview, when we see the word wives submit to your husbands, we take that to be a certain thing. But in a Greek worldview, it means a lot, it means something different. When I give you authority under myself, I am giving you absolute authority. And that's what I want you to see, because that directly relates to this whole point. Anyway, we will continue, because isn't this fun? I'm trying to bring you guys into this, make you see the philosophical and theological implications of what Romans is all about. Because one of the most important verses, by the way, chapter 8 is where in Romans? It's basically the middle, because we have 16 chapters, right? And this is the most important chapter in my mind in Romans.
Dragging us kicking and screaming.
Dragging you, kicking you. No, you're all coming along. This is fun. Father God, we thank you for your word. We pray to continue to look after us through this week. In your name we pray. Amen.